Okay, how's everybody doing? So this is going to be how to make a realistic tree sort of version 2, because I did do quite a bit of extensive coverage on how to model an old growth tree further back chronologically during the Glover Road build or near the end of it. But we always advance and keep growing in our skill set as modelers, and we tend to do things a little bit differently maybe. I don't know about you, but I like to try new things all the time in terms of methodology and construction, and trying to raise the bar, right? Like that's what we need to do anyway. We want to challenge ourselves. So, and the higher we raise the bar, the better scenery we end up doing when we practice it and study it and devote time to it. And as a result, it becomes a more immersive and enjoyable layout. Furthermore, the smaller the layout, the more detailed it is, the factor's the same. It's just as enjoyable. I think there was a comment made, I believe it was Grant from Southern Alberta Rail, his YouTube channel. He made an interesting comment in answer to one of his subscribers, and he said that the model railroader often defines their scale in terms of how they rail fan. I thought that is so true. Like if you rail fan from the top of an overpass in your town, let's say, and you're used to seeing the tops of trains and the half the length of the yard, then you're probably going to envision that and want to build a model railroad that way. If you're sitting on top of a hill and you can see, like up here, let's say Chicamas Canyon, BC Rail snaking through, the upper pass, you're going to see a long train, like maybe 1/8 of a mile long, or even 1/4 mile long, and that's going to be your idea. That might define your scale, like even N over HO. Or you can sort of micro that down, and maybe you just want to have a tunnel portal entering your layout, whatever. Or like for me, like I see the local industries being switched all the time, like where I live here. And there's a double main with trains, banging the rails going through long trains. Like to me, as a model, that would mean it would just be this, 10-foot module with a runaround off staging, where trains looping around going by. But that's not my thing, right? I like the slow moving, highly detailed scene where I stand and watch, and when I look from right to left, I only see 100 yards because there's trees in the way or a building in the way, and I'm right down in the dirt with the train. So that's why I model the way I do. And so that brings me to trees. Like there's so many trees here, and there's so much part of the landscape, not so much like a desert or Southern California, but Southern California has trees too. And a lot of the terrain, like, can be quite challenging. The color variations, in the desert terrain, and deserts bloom too, right? But in this case with trees, I always want to up my game a bit with trees. And as each one that you build, like in this case here, they just get better. They look better. Oftentimes you'll think of a type of a tree and you'll try to build it, like in this case a hemlock, what I'm going to do with this one. Whereas this one I was thinking sort of Douglas fir, but it actually looks more like a spruce. I think I mentioned that before, but I do have 3 that I did that do look very much like Douglas fir, but they were a lot of work. But anyway, I just want to point something out with this, wiring over the stem, the flower stem from Craft, the craft store, and then with this green wire. It seems labor intensive, but you can really get into it. Like I pumped this off in no time. I was listening to the radio and I couldn't believe how, you get into it. You wind, you loop in your finger, loop around the thumb, finger, thumb, and before you know it, you have an armature twisted up and it ends up looking like this because you're just pushing the loops back and holding on, and the whole tree's bent and mangled almost like that, right? But then once you get all your loop work done, you just straighten it out. Right? And you'll get it straight enough, and when you pull the tree out to shape, all that straightens out real good. Okay, so I just want to say at this point with this particular tree armature, this is a fairly universal armature. So okay, so you can use this as an evergreen. Depending on how you shape the boughs, it could represent a Sitka spruce, a Douglas fir, a western hemlock, a pine. A lot of it, those characteristics depend on the shape of the boughs, right? Which you can just look at photographs and determine. And if you spend the time to shape them, then they tend to represent that species fairly well. Furthermore, this can also be substituted for deciduous trees too, like cottonwoods and alders. Not really maples, because maples have major multiple boughs, but cottonwoods actually go up about a third of the way with nothing, and then they have all these upper limbs like this, and then what you do is you just point them all up like that, and then they get flocked with deciduous type leaves, right? You can add static grass for secondary branch structure, and then depending how you flock them, they can make really nice cottonwoods as well. Okay, so I just want to talk about looping the branches on this wire armature tree and tell you why I want to do it this way. See how they're looped like that, just like dragonfly wings, right? Like before I cut these and make the loops into two limbs, I want to lay the loops out so they're horizontal, like a cradle. And I'll show you why, because when I put glue on, I just want to glue on the last half of the limb. I don't want branches all the way to the trunk, okay? I want to build the tree more sparse but a little more realistically, so I just want to flock with 12mm static grass on the last half of these limbs. And the reason for that is for the loop like that, like a cradle, is I can lay the static grass across it. Okay? And then when I go to cut it, I can pull it apart, and that's what I want. Like these are the little secondary branches, the 12mm. Okay? Rather than trying to balance it on a single one like this, and it just falls off, right? See, if I try to put it on this single limb, watch, it just falls off, right? But look what happens when I put it on the loop. See? But it won't sit on here. So, and then you get the branches running like the way they do, like on a limb like that, where the branches, the secondary branches are horizontal as well. And when I snip the end of the loop here and pull that apart, well, I want it to rip apart because I want it to be rough, okay? Okay, so let's talk about the branch and trunk texturing here. In this case, for these type of trees, I like to just use sawdust. I never invented the idea, obviously, but it's out there and it's a good one. And I generally just take some very thin matte medium, mostly for the top part, because it just seeps into that wire coil that's wrapped around your trunk. And then I tend to use thicker, down lower. So I just saturate the whole trunk. I don't worry too much about the limbs because the static grass thatching seems to cling just fine with this matte medium. Or I think a lot of people use Mod Podge. I don't use it. It's just a cheap form of matte medium, a hobby version. So, I don't, like, I go to artist supply stores generally to buy all my materials, and they don't sell that stuff there usually where I go. And the matte medium that I choose to use is of excellent quality, and there's a reason for it if you've been in this game long enough, just because of the sheer quality of it and the flexibility of it. And it's like a concentrate, right? So I soak it down like I just showed there, and then I just rotate it and I just sprinkle the sawdust on. This is just softwood sawdust, and if you have any trouble finding it, just go to your local hardware store. Like I went to Windsor Plywood the other day, I ran out and I took a little yogurt cup and just asked one of the workers there, and I just walked up to the cutoff saw and filled up a tub full of sawdust. So that works really well, and when that dries hard, a little bit of it flakes off, like the loose particles, and then you end up with a nice hard and textured trunk. I just want to talk about trees for a second. You know, there's 101 ways to do trees, as you know. This particular way, like it's nice to break away and do the same thing differently, or the, you know, sort of the, with model railroading, you know how, we do things, multiple copies of things, for example, trees, right? And there's so many different ways of doing it, so many nice ways of doing it too, of, with the static grass especially, and foam, and man, I've seen some just remarkable model trees from so many different materials. And this is one that I just sort of adopted. Somebody did the original concept of this looping system, and then cutting the loop to get the 2 extra limbs was from a fellow from Europe somewhere. I think I have a link somewhere. I'll try to find it. But so, and then the sawdust was his idea too. But I thought, wow, what a brilliant idea. And like I was just going through cleaning up my table saw there in the summer, and there's a trough of catch under there, so I kept all that sawdust, right, because it makes really nice bark. It has a, like when you put the podge on there, or matte medium, or even carpenter's glue, 50-50 water and carpenter's glue works good too, or even a little bit thicker. It just seems to absorb nice, and it covers up all the wire armature nicely. It makes for a nice bark. But I wouldn't want to do all my trees like this. Imagine standing before a judge and your sentence is, you must build me 10,000 of trees just like this. I'll do the time, Your Honor. No, but it's nice to do a few trees like this because you can put them on the edge, like the perimeter. Like let's just say you have a favorite yard office, or the edge of a barn, or even the approach to a bridge that you really like. Some little signature scene that you want to dress with, maybe just half a dozen trees like this, and then sort of put some of those other background trees sort of in behind to fill in the space, then it makes the whole scene look really cool because you don't really notice the trees behind you. Like you just see the ones like on the periphery, right? Like that's where the eye goes to, the tracks going by, the train, the trees, and the imagination does the rest, right? But once again, it's nice to sit back like this and to just model a tree, right? You know what I mean? And I like to do it this way because once these are dry, you shake these off and you just airbrush them, like dark brown. And they, make for really, really nice branches. And then you can flock them. Like even with foam, like I've seen some stunning pics of trees, but very, very light. Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to mention as well. Is we all do this, and I do it too, where you overflock, the tree. Everyone does it. Like it's just a natural sort of instinct, right? But some of the best trees that I've ever seen by other modelers were they applied the minimum, like they never overflocked them. They let more of the limbs show and stuff. And boy, they just look stunning, Like we're just not used to looking at them on the model railroad that way. But when you go out into reality, like not necessarily evergreens, but a lot of deciduous trees, if you really get up close, like especially when you see them in the winter, you get to see the whole branch structure. But there isn't nearly as much flock in the real world, like leaves, in terms of what we often put on the model. And it's very hard to not do that, you know, to not put more than we need. So the nice thing about doing individual trees like this is similar to like with these three that I did like a while back. Like, see how the trees are very sparse, like they're just not heavily flocked. With the heavily flocked ones in behind, this tree really stands out. Excuse me. And I really like the way these three turned out. I sort of built them together, but there's our little eagle friend there. See, there he is. Anyway, you know, you learn stuff, right? Like that's the point. Like to sit back, you know, relax, and I'm going to try something different. And the idea is to create a kind of a light thatching, and then you can spray matte medium or even, you know, craft paint, adhesive, and then add the next. Like this is 12 mil right here. Then you can add 7, 4, and 2. Like graduate it down very light, and just get a really nice branch sort of flocking texture. Can often produce stunning results. I saw a feature in a magazine about 30 years ago or so. It was a Burlington Northern diorama, HO scale, and the guy had done, the trees are about 18 inches high. Close to these ones here, which are, it's about 12 inches. This one on the left here is about 18 or so, which is only 100 and, I think it's, what's this, 85 feet. It's nothing. The trees outside my house here are 180 feet. Anyway, there's a railway just, you know, a stone's throw away. But anyway, yeah, it was just a beautiful layout, and it just struck me. I never forgot it, and I thought, you know, one day I want to build an HO scale operating diorama like that with scale trees. I mean, this is only, like, this tree's 12 inches, right? It's only, like, the train's like this high, right? And it's only 60, 70 feet. It's not very big. Most of the trees you see on HO layouts, like, you know, they're 40 feet, 30 feet. Anyway, if you're feeling that you want to change up and you want to build a model tree, you should try it. It's actually really relaxing. Remember the loops? The sort of dragonfly wing loops as a saddle, right? Serves as a saddle to support the thatching of the 12 mil woodland scenic static grass, right? It doesn't really matter on the color here because you're going to paint it. So this I'm going to paint as well, but first I'm going to move off. I'm going to massage all these limbs. Look at all the grass coming off there. It's quite a bit, eh? I get to save that and reuse all that again. So I'm going to massage these over, and then what I'm going to do is, I'll show you, is I don't want to put another application. This is only one application here because I don't want it to build up like a you know, like a solid, like I want some transparency there. Like I don't want a solid thatched mat. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end of the loop now. I'm just going to snip the limb and then pull them apart. Okay. Now these can be snipped back a ways too if you want to vary the length. And then there's a little bit of a hook on the end because of the loop. So that's what I'm going to do. And then you can see already there's the primary branches there, see? Now what I'm going to do is I may apply another just on the ends, like just brush that down and throw on one more application, but it depends on the look of the tree that you want. Okay, so the 12 mil's been laid on and the 4 mil's been laid on now, right? And so now I'm massaging off all the residual 4 mil. Okay, I just stroke it like this. You can see all the recovery here, which can be reused. This is the final stage before paint, before I take the airbrush to this. And I'm not going to paint the whole armature completely brown or umber, but I'm going to do the inside of the trunk and the branches. And I'll let some of the green show through wherever it wants on the thatched branches here, right? Okay, so here's a nice tree armature that I really like. It just came out, like turned out very nice, I think. You know, this is what happens when you model multiple units, right? Remember how I talked about that? Like build lots of whatever it is you're building, you know, or several copies, and you know, you'll surprise yourself. Like things just come out differently. That's just the nature of creativity. And these were sort of, I had Douglas firs in mine, old growth from around here. And this one was fairly tall, so it had a more slender, spruce-like look to it. And so what I did was I curled the boughs, like in this symbol here. Spruce are like that with a long sweeping boughs. And it's fairly dark. I painted it much darker near the bottom, and then it's lighter near the top here, see? That's the original green showing through. And what I'm going to use to dress these with is because spruce, at sometimes when they're kind of in bloom, have a more brighter green sort of needle arrangement. And I'm going to use this fine turf, which I really like, the green grass called T45. And I'm just going to apply with glue with a brush and just dress up some of these boughs and see how they look, okay? Now this is what I talked about earlier about, you know, modeling the tree, right? Like how many times do we model a model? Like how much time do we put into building a model kit? How much time do we put into modeling our trains or our buildings, right? But did we ever think of trees that way? Did we ever actually think of modeling a tree? Because it can be quite powerful and have quite an impact on your layout or your diorama if you actually approach it with that kind of an attitude and philosophy. See, once again, I can move limbs up and down and out of the way. And the trick is here is these branches here that you see. We want to maintain that, so we don't want to, you know, flood the whole limb with fine turf foam. You know, we want to sprinkle it on and let those limbs play the role. So you get light shining through and you can see the limbs. Okay. Okay, so you can see the fine turf application, and which goes to about here. You see the branch structure above, which in its own right doesn't look too bad either, right? Just depends on the color, and it depends on the lighting too. There's quite a bit of bright light here, but when it's on the layout it looks quite a bit darker, see? So lighting plays a big role, but it has a really nice, like I find for spruce, it has those, you can see the boughs, you know, how they droop kind of in the branch structure with the foam coming off them. I really like it. So it's nice to mix up, you know, the foam and the fiber, like the fine in this case. You see it's very, very fine. Stuff that's used for grass mostly. That we used to use this back in the day, I remember in the museum, to dress the plumosa fern. We went through just like buckets of this stuff, you know, because it really dressed trees up nice. Anyway, it's the Woodland Scenics Fine Turf Green Grass D45. It's nice stuff.